The stagecoach rolled into Alamosa, Colorado on the first Tuesday of September 1878, carrying a woman who would change everything Wade Jamison thought he knew about himself. She stepped down onto the dusty street with her dark skirts gathered in one hand and a leather satchel in the other, squinting against the afternoon sun that turned the distant Sangre de Cristo Mountains into purple silhouettes. Wade watched from across the street where he leaned against the post outside the saloon, a half-smoked cigarette between his fingers, and felt something shift in his chest that had nothing to do with the whiskey he had been nursing all morning. Willow Harper was 23 years old and had traveled over 1,000 miles from Philadelphia to take a position as the new schoolteacher in this dusty Colorado town that sat in the San Luis Valley like a collection of forgotten dreams. She had answered an advertisement in the newspaper seeking an educated woman willing to teach children on the frontier. And though her mother had wept and her father had threatened to disown her, Willow had packed her trunk with books and sensible dresses and bought a ticket west. She believed in the power of education the way some people believed in God, with a fervent certainty that bordered on religious conviction. Wade was 26 and had been working cattle since he was 14 years old, when his father died of pneumonia and left him responsible for his mother and 2 younger sisters. He had learned to rope and ride and shoot before most boys learned to read, and he wore the life of a cowboy like a second skin, comfortable and familiar. Love was something that happened to other people, people with time for such foolishness. He had responsibilities and a ranch to run, even if it was just a small spread with barely enough cattle to make it through the winter. The schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a simple wooden structure that had been built 3 years earlier with funds raised by the families who believed their children deserved better than ignorance. The previous teacher, a nervous man from Denver, had lasted exactly 2 months before fleeing back to civilization, claiming the isolation would drive him mad. Willow walked toward it now with her chin lifted and her back straight, determined not to show the uncertainty that fluttered in her stomach like a trapped bird. Wade crushed out his cigarette and found himself following her, though he could not have said why. His boots kicked up small clouds of dust with each step, and he kept a respectful distance, curious about this woman who looked too refined for a place like Alamosa. She wore her auburn hair pinned up in a neat bun, and her dress, though travel-worn, was clearly well made. Everything about her spoke of a world he had never known, one filled with books and music and civilized conversation. She stopped in front of the schoolhouse and set down her satchel, then turned to find Wade standing 10 feet behind her. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. Hers were green, the color of new grass after a spring rain, and they regarded him with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. "Can I help you with something?" Her voice was clear and carried the crisp pronunciation of someone educated in the East. Wade removed his hat, suddenly aware of how rough he must look, with 3 days of stubble on his jaw and dust coating his clothes. "Figured you might need help getting settled. Name is Wade Jamison. My nephew will be one of your students. Willow Harper." She extended her gloved hand and he shook it carefully, afraid his calloused palm might damage something so delicate. "Your nephew, my sister Clara's boy, Tommy. He is 8 years old and already reading better than most adults in town." There was pride in Wade's voice, though he tried to hide it. Willow's expression softened. "I look forward to meeting him. Is the schoolhouse locked? Probably not. Nobody steals much in Alamosa, not enough worth taking." Wade stepped forward and pushed open the door, which swung inward with a protesting creak. The interior was spare but functional. Rows of wooden benches faced a blackboard that had seen better days, and a teacher's desk stood at the front of the room near a pot-bellied stove that would be essential come winter. Sunlight streamed through two small windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the still air. Willow walked slowly between the benches, running her fingers along the worn wood, and Wade watched her face transform as she imagined the room filled with children. "It is perfect," she said quietly, and he could tell she meant it. "You have not seen the living quarters yet. They are out back, just a small room really, but the town council fixed it up for you." The room was indeed small, barely large enough for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk, but it was clean and had its own window that looked out toward the mountains. Willow set her satchel on the bed and turned to Wade with a smile that made his breath catch. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Jamison. I should start preparing for tomorrow. School begins at 8 o'clock, does it not?" "Yes, madam. I will make sure Tommy gets here on time." Wade replaced his hat and backed toward the door, suddenly eager to escape the confusing feelings this woman stirred in him. "If you need anything, my ranch is about 3 miles south of town. Anyone can give you directions." He left quickly, his long strides eating up the ground between the schoolhouse and the livery where he had left his horse. The animal, a sturdy bay gelding named Rusty, nickered in greeting, and Wade pressed his forehead against the horse's warm neck, breathing in the familiar scent of hay and leather. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he muttered to himself, but the horse had no answer. That night, Willow unpacked her few belongings and arranged her books on a small shelf someone had nailed to the wall. She had brought her favorites: Shakespeare, Whitman, Dickens, and several textbooks she would use for teaching. As darkness fell over Alamosa, she lit a lamp and sat on the edge of her narrow bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the frontier. Dogs barked in the distance, and somewhere a piano played badly, the notes drifting through the cool evening air. She thought of her family back in Philadelphia, of the comfortable house with its gas lamps and indoor plumbing, of her father's study lined with books and her mother's parlor where they took tea every afternoon. She had given up all of that for this, for a chance to make a difference in the lives of children who might never have another opportunity for education. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders, but instead of crushing her, it felt right, like she had finally found the purpose she had been searching for. Wade returned to his ranch and found his mother, Margaret, waiting up for him. She was a small woman, worn thin by hard years and harder losses, but her eyes were sharp and missed nothing. "You smell like smoke and whiskey," she said without preamble. "I had a drink. That is not a crime." Wade hung his hat on the peg by the door and avoided her gaze. "Your sister was here earlier with Tommy. She said the new teacher arrived today." "She did. I helped her get settled at the schoolhouse." Margaret studied her son with the piercing attention only a mother could muster. "What is she like?" "Eastern. Educated, not like anyone from around here." Wade poured himself a cup of coffee from the pot that always sat warming on the stove. "She will probably last even less time than the last one. You do not know that. I know this country. It breaks people who are not ready for it." Margaret rose from her chair and placed a weathered hand on Wade's arm. "Maybe she is stronger than she looks. Maybe you should give her a chance before deciding she will fail." Wade said nothing, but he thought about green eyes and auburn hair as he lay in his narrow bed that night, listening to the wind whisper across the valley. He told himself it was concern for Tommy's education that kept Willow Harper in his thoughts, nothing more. The next morning dawned clear and bright, with the September sun burning off the night's chill by the time children began arriving at the schoolhouse. Willow stood at the door in a fresh dress of dark blue calico, greeting each student by name as they filed past. There were 17 children ranging in age from 6 to 14, sons and daughters of ranchers, shopkeepers, and laborers. They regarded her with open curiosity, these frontier children who had seen teachers come and go like the seasons. Tommy Jamison arrived precisely at 8 o'clock, his face scrubbed clean and his hair slicked back with water. He was a small boy with his uncle's dark eyes and a serious expression that made him seem older than his 8 years. Behind him came Wade, leading his horse by the reins, and Willow felt her heart do something peculiar when their eyes met. "Morning, Miss Harper," Wade said, touching the brim of his hat. "Got Tommy here safe and sound." "Good morning, Mr. Jamison. Thank you for bringing him." Willow smiled at Tommy. "I understand you are quite the reader." The boy ducked his head, shy but pleased. "I like stories about knights and dragons." "Then I think we shall get along very well. I have several books you might enjoy." Willow placed a gentle hand on Tommy's shoulder and guided him inside, aware that Wade lingered in the doorway, watching. The first day of school passed in a blur of names and lessons, and getting to know the unique challenges each student brought. Willow assessed their reading levels, listened to them recite arithmetic, and began to understand the enormous task ahead of her. Some of the older children could barely write their own names, while others, like Tommy, devoured knowledge with an appetite that thrilled her. By the time she dismissed them at 3 o'clock, her voice was hoarse and her feet ached, but she felt more alive than she had in years. Wade was waiting outside when Tommy emerged, and the boy ran to his uncle with the enthusiasm of youth. "She knows about knights, Uncle Wade. And she said tomorrow we can start reading about King Arthur." "That is good, Tommy, real good." Wade's eyes found Willow as she appeared in the doorway, and something unspoken passed between them. "How did he do?" "Wonderfully. He is a bright boy." Willow stepped down into the dusty yard, brushing chalk dust from her skirts. "You should be proud." "I am. His ma is too." Wade lifted Tommy onto his horse, then swung up behind him. "You need anything from town before we head out?" Willow hesitated, surprised by the offer. "I was planning to walk to the general store later. I need a few supplies. Town is not always safe for a woman alone, especially one new to these parts. How about I come back in an hour and walk with you?" The protective note in his voice made Willow want to bristle with independence, but the genuine concern in his dark eyes softened her response. "That would be kind of you, Mr. Jamison. Thank you." True to his word, Wade returned an hour later, having taken Tommy home and cleaned up. He had shaved and changed his shirt, though he would have denied doing it for any particular reason. They walked together down the main street of Alamosa, past the saloon and the hotel and the sheriff's office, drawing curious looks from townspeople who were not accustomed to seeing Wade Jamison escort a lady. The general store was owned by a German immigrant named Otto Schmidt, who greeted Willow with enthusiastic welcome. "Miss Harper, the teacher. Welcome, welcome. What can I get for you today?" Willow purchased basics she needed for her small room: soap, coffee, sugar, flour, and a few vegetables. Wade carried her purchases without being asked, and they walked back toward the schoolhouse as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. "Tell me about Alamosa," Willow said as they walked. "How long have you lived here?" "All my life. My pa came out here in '58, right after the valley opened up for settlement. He had dreams of running cattle, making something of himself." Wade's voice carried old grief. "He died when I was 14, left me to take care of my ma and sisters. That must have been difficult." "It was what needed doing. You do what you have to out here. No room for self-pity." Willow glanced at his profile, noting the hard line of his jaw and the weathered quality of his skin that came from years under the sun. "Do you ever resent it, having to give up your own dreams?" Wade was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. Never had dreams that did not involve the ranch. That land, those cattle, that is all I know, all I am good at. I doubt that is true." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Willow felt heat rise in her cheeks under the intensity of his gaze. "What about you, Miss Harper? What made a refined lady from Philadelphia come all the way out here to teach children in a nowhere town?" "This is not a nowhere town. These children matter just as much as children in Philadelphia, maybe more, because they have fewer opportunities." Willow's voice carried passion now. "I came here because I believe education can change lives. I believe every child deserves a chance to reach their full potential, regardless of where they were born." Wade smiled, a real smile that transformed his stern features. "You are going to shake this town up, Miss Harper, I can tell." They had reached the schoolhouse, and Willow took her packages from Wade's arms, their fingers brushing in the transfer. The contact sent a jolt through her that she tried to ignore. "Thank you for your escort, Mr. Jamison, and for carrying my things. Wade, just Wade. Mr. Jamison makes me feel like my pa. Then you should call me Willow." He touched his hat brim in farewell. "Willow, pretty name, fits you." She watched him walk away, tall and lean in his worn jeans and dusty boots, and admitted to herself that Wade Jamison was nothing like the men she had known in Philadelphia. Those men had been all polish and proper manners, but underneath the veneer, they had been soft, without substance. Wade was rough around the edges, but she sensed a core of solid strength in him, a fundamental decency that drew her despite her better judgment. The weeks that followed established a routine. Willow threw herself into teaching with fierce dedication, arriving at the schoolhouse before dawn to prepare lessons, and staying late into the evening to grade assignments by lamplight. The children responded to her enthusiasm, even the skeptical older ones who had expected another teacher who did not care. She made learning exciting, turning arithmetic into games and history into stories that captured their imaginations. Wade found excuses to come to town more often than necessary. He brought Tommy to school every morning and picked him up most afternoons, always taking a moment to speak with Willow. Sometimes he brought her things: fresh eggs from his chickens, vegetables from his mother's garden, a book he thought she might enjoy even though he admitted he had not read it himself. "Where did you get this?" Willow asked one afternoon, holding up a leather-bound copy of Ivanhoe. Wade shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "There is a bookshop in Denver. I was up there last week buying supplies and saw it in the window. Thought you might like it, you being a reader and all." Willow's throat tightened with emotion. He had ridden all the way to Denver, over 100 miles away, and thought of her. "Wade, this is too much. It is just a book." "No, it is not just a book. It is thoughtful and kind, and I will treasure it. Thank you." The way she said his name, soft and warm, made Wade's heart hammer in his chest. He cleared his throat and stepped back. "Well, Tommy is waiting. I should get him home." But he lingered, as he always did, reluctant to leave her presence. Willow noticed and felt a matching reluctance rise in her own chest. She had been in Alamosa for nearly 2 months now, and somewhere along the way, Wade Jamison had become the best part of her days. October brought the first real cold snap, a reminder that winter in the High Valley could be brutal. Willow woke one morning to find frost coating her window and her breath misting in the air of her small room. She dressed quickly, adding a shawl over her dress, and hurried to start a fire in the schoolhouse stove before the children arrived. The door burst open just as she got the kindling lit, and Wade strode in carrying an armload of split wood. He looked surprised to find her there so early. "You are going to freeze in here," he said without preamble. "This stove needs to be going well before the children arrive." "I was just lighting it. with barely enough wood to last an hour. Wade dumped his load beside the stove and began feeding larger pieces into the growing fire. You need to keep this stocked, especially as it gets colder. Colorado winters are not like what you are used to back east. Willow bristled at his tone. I am perfectly capable of managing a fire, Mr. Jamison. He straightened and turned to face her, his eyes flashing. It is Wade, remember, and I am not saying you are not capable. I am saying you do not know this country yet. People die out here from underestimating the cold. I am not a child who needs constant supervision. No, you are a stubborn woman who is too proud to accept help when it is offered. They glared at each other across the warming room, and the air between them crackled with more than just anger. Willow became aware of how close they were standing, close enough that she could see the lighter flecks of brown in his dark eyes and smell the scent of leather and pine that clung to his clothes. I appreciate your concern, she said quietly, forcing herself to be reasonable. Truly, I do. But I came out here to be independent, to prove I could manage on my own. Wade's expression softened. There is a difference between independence and isolation, Willow. Folks out here survive by helping each other. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. She nodded slowly, feeling her defenses crumble. You are right. I am sorry. Thank you for bringing the wood. I will bring more tomorrow, and I will show you how to stack it properly so it dries out and burns better. Wade moved toward the door, then paused. There is a social at the church this Saturday evening. Dancing and food, you should come. I do not know anyone. You know me, and Tommy and Clara, that is a start. He smiled, that rare, transformative smile that made her knees weak. Say you will come. Willow found herself smiling back. All right, I will come. Saturday evening found Willow in her best dress, a deep green silk that brought out the color of her eyes. She had taken special care with her hair, allowing soft curls to frame her face instead of pulling it all back in her usual severe bun. As she walked toward the small church at the center of town, she could hear music spilling out into the night, fiddles and guitars creating a lively melody that made her feet want to move. The interior was packed with people, families she recognized from school, and many she did not. Long tables held dishes brought by the townswomen, fried chicken, biscuits, pies, and casseroles. The air smelled of food and perfume, and the peculiar mix of sweat and excitement that came from people crowded into a small space. Wade saw her the moment she entered. He had been standing with a group of ranchers, nursing a cup of punch, and the sight of Willow in that green dress made him forget whatever conversation he had been having. He crossed the room with purposeful strides. You came. You made it difficult to refuse. Willow's smile was nervous. I feel rather out of place. You look beautiful. The words escaped before Wade could stop them, and he saw color flood her cheeks. Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself. He did indeed, having traded his usual work clothes for dark trousers and a white shirt that emphasized his broad shoulders. His hair was still damp from a recent washing, curling slightly at his collar. Clara appeared at Wade's elbow, a pretty woman in her late 20s with the same dark eyes as her brother. Tommy clung to her skirts, suddenly shy. Miss Harper, I am so glad you could come. I am Clara, Wade's sister. Please call me Willow, and I am delighted to meet you properly. The two women fell into easy conversation, and Wade watched Willow relax as Clara drew her into the warmth of community. Other people stopped by to introduce themselves, welcoming the new teacher with genuine friendliness. Wade felt a surge of pride, though he could not have said exactly why, as Willow charmed his neighbors with her intelligence and grace. When the dancing began, Wade waited through 2 songs before he worked up the courage to ask her, "Would you dance with me?" Willow looked up at him, her green eyes luminous in the lamplight. "I would like that very much." He led her onto the floor, placing one hand on her waist and taking her other hand in his. The fiddles struck up a waltz and they began to move together. Willow had been taught to dance by a professional instructor in Philadelphia, but Wade had learned in rooms like this, at socials and barn dances, and his natural grace surprised her. "You are a good dancer," she said as he spun her smoothly through a turn. "Do not sound so shocked." "I am not shocked, just pleasantly surprised." They danced in comfortable silence for a moment before Wade spoke again, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I have been thinking about you." Willow's heart stuttered. "Have you? More than I should. More than is probably wise." His hand tightened slightly on her waist. "I know you are not planning to stay in Alamosa forever. Woman like you, with your education and breeding, you will want to go back east eventually. What makes you think that? Because this place is nothing like what you are used to. Because you deserve better than a dusty frontier town and a struggling ranch." Willow stopped dancing, forcing Wade to halt with her. Around them, other couples continued to whirl, but she focused entirely on the man in front of her. "You do not get to decide what I deserve, Wade Jamison. And you certainly do not get to assume you know what I want. Then tell me. What do you want?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility. Willow knew her answer, had known it for weeks, even though she had been afraid to admit it. "I want to stay in Alamosa. I want to teach these children and be part of this community. And I want you to stop treating me like I am made of glass, like I will shatter at the first sign of hardship." Wade's expression was unreadable. "Willow, I know this life is hard. I know the winters are brutal and the summers are scorching, and there are 1,000 ways to fail out here. But I also know I have never felt more alive than I have in these past 2 months. I have never felt like I mattered more." She drew a shaky breath. "And I have never met anyone who challenged me and infuriated me and made me feel the way you do. How do I make you feel? Like I am exactly where I am supposed to be." Wade made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer. "Propriety be damned. I am just a cowboy, Willow. I do not have fancy words or smooth manners. All I have is a ranch that barely makes ends meet and a family that depends on me. I do not want fancy words. I want honesty. I want what is real. Then here is the truth. I have been half in love with you since the day you stepped off that stagecoach. And I am terrified because I do not know how to do this. I do not know how to court a woman like you." Willow reached up and touched his cheek, feeling the rasp of stubble against her palm. "Start by kissing me." Wade did not need to be told twice. He bent his head and captured her lips with his, and the entire world narrowed to the point of contact between them. The kiss started gentle, tentative, then deepened as Willow's arms wrapped around his neck and his hands pulled her flush against him. She tasted like cider and hope, and Wade thought he might drown in the feeling of finally holding her. Around them, the dancing had stopped. People were staring, whispering, but neither Wade nor Willow cared. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "I guess the whole town knows now," he murmured. "Good. Let them know." Willow was grinning, her face radiant with joy. Clara appeared at their side, her expression torn between delight and exasperation. "You two are causing quite a scene." "Sorry," Wade said, not sounding sorry at all. "No, you are not. But I am happy for you, brother. Miss Harper, welcome to the family." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and knowing looks. Wade kept Willow close to his side, his hand resting possessively at the small of her back, and she leaned into him with a naturalness that made it seem like they had been together for years instead of hours. As the social began to wind down and people started heading home, Wade walked Willow back to the schoolhouse. The night was cold and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. The mountains loomed dark against the horizon, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. "I should let you get some rest," Wade said when they reached her door, though he made no move to leave. "You should." Willow smiled up at him. "But I hope you will not." He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring every second. When they parted, his voice was rough. "I will court you proper. Take you to dinner, bring you flowers, do all the things a lady deserves." "I would like that. But Wade, I need you to understand something. I am not some delicate flower that needs protecting. I am strong and I am capable, and I chose this life. I chose you. I know. That is one of the things I love about you." Willow's breath caught. "Love?" Wade's ears turned red, but he did not take it back. "Too soon." "No, not too soon at all." She kissed him softly. "Good night, Wade." "Good night, Willow." She watched him walk away into the darkness, his boots crunching on the frozen ground, and pressed her fingers to her lips where the feeling of his kiss still lingered. Everything had changed tonight, and she could not wait to see what tomorrow would bring. The next few weeks were a blur of stolen moments and growing closeness. Wade came to town every day, sometimes with Tommy, sometimes alone. He brought Willow flowers, wildflowers he picked himself from the valley, their colors fading but their sentiment clear. They took walks together in the evenings when her teaching was done, exploring the edges of town and talking about everything and nothing. Wade told her about his childhood, about watching his father build the ranch from nothing and learning the value of hard work. He told her about the year his father died, how he had been terrified he would fail, would lose everything his father had worked for. Willow told him about Philadelphia, about feeling suffocated by expectations and society's rules, about dreaming of a life where she could make a real difference. "My father wanted me to marry well," she confessed one evening as they sat on the steps of the schoolhouse, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of orange and pink. He had already picked out several suitable candidates, men with money and family names and absolutely no substance. "Why did you not?" "Because I knew I would wither and die in that life. I would become just another ornament in someone's parlor, pretty and useless." Willow leaned against Wade's shoulder. "I wanted adventure, purpose. I wanted to matter. You matter." Wade wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. "You matter to those children, to this town, to me." She turned her face up to his, and he kissed her with a tenderness that made her throat ache. Being with Wade was nothing like she had imagined romance would be. It was better. It was real. But not everyone in Alamosa was happy about their relationship. One afternoon in late October, Wade was in the general store buying supplies when Otto Schmidt pulled him aside. "Wade, I must speak with you about Miss Harper." Wade's jaw tightened. "What about her?" "Some of the townspeople, they are concerned. She is the school teacher and you, well, you are spending a great deal of time together. It does not look proper." "We are courting, Otto. That is all. What is improper about that?" The older man shifted uncomfortably. "Miss Harper's position requires her to be above reproach. If there is even a hint of scandal, the school board might have to let her go." Wade felt anger surge through him, hot and fierce. "There is no scandal. I have been nothing but respectful." "I believe you, Wade. But you know how people talk. Perhaps you should be more discreet until you make your intentions clear." Wade left the store with his supplies and his temper both running hot. He rode straight to the schoolhouse, where Willow was cleaning the blackboard after dismissing her students. She took one look at his face and set down her eraser. "What happened?" "Otto Schmidt thinks we are causing a scandal, says the school board might fire you because we are spending too much time together." Wade paced the small room like a caged animal. "It is ridiculous. We have not done anything wrong." Willow felt cold dread settle in her stomach. She had known this was a risk, that small towns judged their school teachers by impossible standards, but she had hoped Alamosa would be different. Maybe we should be more careful. No. Wade stopped pacing and faced her. I am done hiding what I feel. I am done pretending. Wade, this is my job, my entire reason for being here. Then marry me. The words dropped between them like a stone into still water, sending ripples in every direction. Willow stared at him, certain she had misheard. What? Wade closed the distance between them and took her hands in his. Marry me, Willow. Be my wife. Then nobody can say a damned thing about us spending time together. You cannot propose marriage just to silence gossip. That is not why I am asking. I am asking because I love you, because I cannot imagine my life without you in it, because when I think about the future, you are in every picture. His voice was rough with emotion. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few months. But out here you learn to recognize what matters, and you matter more than anything. Tears stung Willow's eyes. I love you too, so much it terrifies me. Is that a yes? She laughed through her tears. Yes, yes, I will marry you. Wade let out a whoop of joy and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around until they were both dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her with all the pent-up passion and longing of the past weeks, and Willow kissed him back with equal fervor. When? She asked when they finally broke apart. As soon as possible, tomorrow if the preacher can do it. Tomorrow seems a bit hasty. What about your family? Do they not deserve to be there? Wade's expression sobered. You are right. I'm getting ahead of myself, but soon, Willow, let us not wait. They decided on 2 weeks, which gave them time to make simple preparations, and for Clara to help Willow fashion a wedding dress from material bought at the general store. Margaret welcomed Willow into the family with open arms, delighted that her son had finally found happiness. Tommy was thrilled at the prospect of his teacher becoming his aunt. The night before the wedding, Willow sat alone in her small room at the schoolhouse, packing her few belongings. Tomorrow she would move to the ranch, would begin her life as Wade's wife. The enormity of the change should have frightened her, but instead she felt only excitement and certainty. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Clara standing there, a knowing smile on her face. I thought you might want some company tonight. One last evening as a single woman. Willow laughed and stepped aside to let her in. You make it sound so dramatic. It is dramatic. Marriage changes everything. Clara sat on the edge of the bed and watched Willow fold a dress. Are you nervous? Should I be? Most brides are. But you seem calm. I am. I know this is right, Clara. I have never been more certain of anything. Clara reached out and squeezed Willow's hand. Wade is a good man, one of the best. He will take care of you, and I will take care of him. Willow's voice was firm. This is a partnership, not a rescue. I am glad to hear you say that. My brother can be a bit overbearing sometimes. He has spent so long taking care of everyone else, he forgets that other people are capable too. I have noticed, Willow smiled, but I can handle him. The two women talked late into the night, and Willow was grateful for the friendship. Clara told her stories about Wade as a boy, about his fierce loyalty and quick temper and enormous heart. By the time Clara left, Willow felt even more confident in her choice. The wedding took place on a bright November morning in the small church. The whole town turned out, cramming into the pews to witness the union of the cowboy and the schoolteacher. Willow wore a simple dress of ivory silk that Clara had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair. Wade stood at the altar in his Sunday best, his eyes locked on Willow as she walked down the aisle alone, having no family to give her away. The preacher, a kindly man named Reverend Thomas, kept the ceremony brief. When it came time for the vows, Wade's voice was steady and strong as he promised to love and cherish Willow for the rest of his life. Willow's voice shook slightly with emotion, but her words were clear as she made the same promises. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Thomas said with a smile. Wade cupped Willow's face in his calloused hands and kissed her with a tenderness that made several of the women in attendance dab at their eyes with handkerchiefs. When they turned to face the congregation as man and wife, the church erupted in applause. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and enough food to feed the whole county. People danced and ate and toasted the happy couple, and Wade kept Willow close to his side, unable to stop touching her, as if he needed the constant contact to believe this was real. As evening fell and the guests began to depart, Wade and Willow finally found themselves alone. Wade led her into the small house he had been born in, the house that was now theirs. He had given up his old room to his mother and moved his things into what had been his parents' room, the largest in the house. "It is not much," he said, suddenly nervous. "Not what you are used to." Willow turned to him and placed her hands on his chest, feeling his heart hammer beneath her palms. "It is perfect. You are perfect. This is all I want." Wade kissed her then, slow and deep, and Willow felt desire unfurl in her belly like a flower opening to the sun. They undressed each other with trembling hands, clumsy with want and inexperience, and came together in the marriage bed with a mixture of tenderness and passion that left them both breathless and awed. Afterward they lay tangled together beneath the quilts, Willow's head on Wade's chest and his arms wrapped securely around her. Outside, the wind whispered across the valley, and stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance. "I love you," Wade murmured into her hair. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I could never regret this." Willow tilted her face up to kiss him. "You are the best decision I ever made." Winter came hard and fast to the San Luis Valley, transforming the landscape into a frozen white expanse. The schoolhouse was cold despite Willow's best efforts with the stove, and she often dismissed class early when the temperature dropped too low. On those days, she would return to the ranch and help Margaret with the endless work of keeping a household running in winter. Living with Wade was an adjustment, learning to share space with another person and navigate the rhythms of ranch life. Willow rose before dawn to help prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, then rode into town with Wade to open the schoolhouse. In the evenings, she helped with mending and cooking, and Wade taught her to play cards by the fire while the wind howled outside. They were happy, deliriously so, but Willow sometimes felt the weight of being the only educated woman for miles around. She missed conversations about books and ideas, missed the intellectual stimulation of her old life. Wade sensed her restlessness and tried to compensate, bringing her books whenever he went to Denver, but he knew it was not enough. One evening in January, as they lay in bed listening to a blizzard rage outside, Wade broached the subject that had been troubling him. "Are you sorry you stayed?" Willow propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "What makes you ask that?" "I see how you look sometimes, like you are somewhere else. I know this life is not what you expected. I know I am not what you expected. Wade Jamison, you listen to me. I am not sorry and I am not somewhere else. I am exactly where I want to be." She traced the line of his jaw with her finger. "Sometimes I miss certain things from my old life, yes, but I do not miss that life itself. Do you understand the difference? I think so. This life, our life, it has meaning. The work I do matters. You matter. That is worth more than all the fancy dinners and opera performances in Philadelphia." She kissed him softly. "Besides, I have everything I need right here." Wade pulled her down on top of him, kissing her with a thoroughness that made her toes curl. I am going to prove you right every day for the rest of our lives." Spring arrived slowly, the snow melting in fits and starts until finally the valley burst into green life. Willow discovered she was pregnant in April, and the joy Wade felt was almost overwhelming. He became even more protective, much to her exasperation, worrying about her teaching and insisting she not overexert herself. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," Willow reminded him as he fussed over her for the 100th time. "I am not an invalid, I know. But you are carrying my child, and I will do everything in my power to keep you both safe." The baby was born in early December, a healthy boy they named William after Wade's father. He had dark hair like his father and his mother's green eyes, and Wade held him with such tenderness that Willow fell in love with her husband all over again. "He is perfect," Wade whispered, staring down at his son with wonder. "He is." Willow was exhausted but radiant, her hair damp with sweat and her face glowing. "We made a person, Wade. We made this perfect little person." Margaret and Clara helped during those first difficult weeks, teaching Willow how to care for an infant while also managing the household. Willow had to take a break from teaching, which frustrated her, but the school board agreed to hold her position until she was ready to return. Wade proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with William when he cried at night and changing diapers without complaint. Watching him with their son, Willow thought about how far they had both come from that first day when she stepped off the stagecoach and Wade watched from across the street. "What are you thinking about?" Wade asked one evening as they sat together on the porch, William sleeping peacefully in Willow's arms. "About how lucky I am. About how everything worked out exactly as it was supposed to. I think about that too, about how close I came to never knowing you, but you did know me. We found each other." Wade wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her and their son close. "We did, and I am never letting go." By the time William was 6 months old, Willow was eager to return to teaching. She arranged for Margaret to watch the baby during school hours, a solution that pleased everyone involved. The children welcomed her back with enthusiasm, and Willow threw herself into her work with renewed energy. The years that followed were full and rich. Another son, Jacob, was born 2 years after William, and a daughter, Grace, came 3 years after that. The ranch prospered under Wade's careful management, and they were able to hire more hands and expand their herd. Willow continued teaching, becoming a beloved fixture in Alamosa, the woman who had come from the East and stayed, who had proven that refinement and frontier toughness were not mutually exclusive. Wade and Willow's love deepened with time, weathering the inevitable storms that all marriages face. They argued sometimes, both of them stubborn and passionate, but they always made up, always remembered what mattered most. On their 10th anniversary, Wade gave Willow a beautiful oak desk for the schoolhouse, handmade by a carpenter in Denver. "So you have a place for all those books," he said as she ran her hands over the smooth wood. "It is beautiful. You are beautiful." Willow kissed him, still feeling that spark that had ignited between them a decade ago. "Thank you for loving me. Thank you for teaching me how." As the children grew, William showed his father's aptitude for ranching while Jacob had his mother's love of books. Grace was a wild combination of both, fierce and independent and loving in equal measure. The house was always full of noise and laughter and the organized chaos of a large family. Tommy, now a young man, took over his own small spread adjacent to Wade's ranch, and Clara remarried a widower from town, finding happiness after years alone. Margaret lived to see all her grandchildren grow, passing peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72. On a warm evening in September, 25 years after Willow first arrived in Alamosa, She and Wade sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. Their children were grown now. William married with children of his own, Jacob away at college studying literature, and Grace teaching at the schoolhouse her mother had once led. You ever think about what your life would have been like if you had not come here? Wade asked, reaching for Willow's hand. She laced her fingers through his, these hands that knew every inch of each other after all these years. Sometimes, but only in passing. This is my life, Wade, the only life I ever wanted, even with all the hardships. The winters and the struggles and the isolation, especially with those. They made us who we are. They brought us together. Willow turned to look at her husband, seeing the lines time had etched around his eyes and the silver threading through his dark hair. I love you more now than I did the day we married. I did not think that was possible, but I do. Wade raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. You came to teach at the schoolhouse, and you ended up teaching me the most important lesson of all. What was that? That love is not weakness. That opening your heart is the bravest thing a person can do. That I was only half alive until you showed up and made me whole. Tears gathered in Willow's eyes. That is the most beautiful thing you have ever said to me. I've had 25 years to practice. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell over the valley, the same valley where they had built their life together. Inside the house, they could hear their granddaughter playing the piano, the sweet notes drifting out through the open windows. The ranch that Wade's father had started and Wade had expanded would pass to William, and the cycle would continue. Later that night, as they lay in their bed, Wade pulled Willow close and kissed her with all the passion and tenderness of their youth. She responded eagerly, and they made love with the practiced ease of long intimacy, still able to surprise and delight each other after all these years. I am the luckiest man alive, Wade murmured against her hair as they drifted toward sleep. We are both lucky. We found each other when neither of us was looking. As Wade's breathing evened out in sleep, Willow stayed awake a little longer, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. She had left Philadelphia seeking adventure and purpose, had traveled over 1,000 miles to teach children in a frontier town. She had found all that and more, had discovered a love that sustained her through every hardship and made every joy sweeter. The schoolhouse still stood at the edge of town, now run by Grace but forever marked by Willow's influence. The books she had brought all those years ago still lined the shelves, joined by hundreds more. 3 generations of children had learned to read in that building, had been taught that education could change their lives. But Willow's greatest legacy was not the school or the books, or even the students she had taught. It was the family she and Wade had built together, the love they had nurtured through good times and bad. It was the proof that 2 people from completely different worlds could find common ground and build something that lasted. The next morning dawned clear and bright, and Willow woke to find Wade already up, standing by the window and watching the sun rise. She joined him, slipping her arm around his waist, and they stood together as they had 1,000 times before. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About that day you arrived in Alamosa, about seeing you step off that stagecoach and feeling like lightning had struck me. I felt it too. I thought I was losing my mind." Wade turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. "Thank you." "For what?" "For choosing me. For staying. For every day we have had together." Willow smiled, the smile that was reserved only for him. "I would choose you again, Wade Jamison. In every lifetime, in every circumstance, I would always choose you." He kissed her then, a kiss that held 25 years of love and commitment and shared history. When they finally broke apart, the sun had fully risen, flooding their bedroom with golden light. "Come on," Wade said, taking her hand. "Let us go make breakfast." William and his family are coming by later, and you know how those grandchildren of ours can eat." They walked together toward the kitchen, hand in hand, partners in everything. The house that had once seemed so unfamiliar to Willow now felt like the only home she had ever known. Every room held memories. Every corner told a story. As she mixed batter for pancakes and Wade started the coffee, Willow thought about the young woman who had arrived in Alamosa so long ago, full of determination and dreams. That woman had been brave, yes, but she had also been naive about what frontier life would demand of her. She had learned, though, had adapted and grown strong in ways she never could have in Philadelphia. The day passed in the pleasant chaos of family, grandchildren running through the house and filling it with laughter. William brought news that his wife was expecting again, their fourth child, and everyone celebrated. They ate dinner together on the porch, a long table laden with food. Multiple generations gathered to share a meal and each other's company. As the afternoon wore on, Wade and Willow slipped away from the crowd, walking hand in hand toward the small creek that ran through their property. It was their favorite place, private and peaceful, where they had spent countless hours talking and dreaming together. "Remember when we first came here?" Wade asked as they settled on their usual spot, a smooth boulder warmed by the sun. "You were so determined to learn everything about ranch life." Willow laughed. "And you were so patient teaching me, even when I insisted on doing everything the hard way. You have always been stubborn. You love that about me. I love everything about you." Wade pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. They sat in silence for a while, watching the water flow over the rocks and listening to the wind whisper through the cottonwood trees. This place, this moment, this man beside her was everything Willow had never known she wanted. "I have been thinking," Wade said eventually, "about retiring, letting William take over the ranch completely." Willow lifted her head to look at him. "Are you sure? The ranch has been your whole life." "No, you have been my whole life. The ranch was just what I did." Wade smiled at her expression. "I want to spend more time with you, Willow. I want to travel, see some of the places you have told me about, maybe even visit Philadelphia." "You want to go to Philadelphia?" "I want to see where you came from. I want to understand the world you left behind for me." Willow felt tears sting her eyes. After all these years, Wade could still surprise her, could still show her new depths to his love. That would be wonderful. "Although I warn you, my family may not be welcoming. I do not care about them. I just want to be with you wherever that is." They made plans as they sat by the creek, talking about cities they might visit and sights they wanted to see. For so long, their world had been bounded by the ranch and the town, by responsibilities and obligations. The thought of being free to explore together, to have adventures just the two of them, was thrilling. That night, after the family had gone home and the house was quiet, Wade and Willow sat in their bedroom and wrote letters. Willow composed a carefully worded note to her parents, whom she had not spoken to in over 2 decades, informing them that she would be visiting Philadelphia with her husband. Wade wrote to a stockbroker in Denver, beginning the process of gradually turning over the ranch operations to William. "Are you nervous?" Wade asked as Willow sealed her letter, terrified, but also excited. She looked at him. "Everything that matters to me is right here. Whether my family accepts that or not does not change how I feel. They would be fools not to see how remarkable you are. You are biased, absolutely, but I am also right." They made love that night with a passion that belied their years, still eager for each other, still finding new ways to express the depth of their connection. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, they talked about their children and grandchildren, about the legacy they were leaving. "Do you think we did all right?" Wade asked. As parents, I mean. I think we did better than all right. Our children are good people, Wade. They are kind and strong and capable. What more could we ask for? I just want them to be happy. They are, because they saw what real love looks like. They saw us. The following months were busy with preparations for the trip and for William's transition to full control of the ranch. Willow officially retired from teaching, though she continued to volunteer at the schoolhouse several times a week, unable to completely let go of her first love. The town threw them a retirement party, a testament to how beloved they had become over the years. In the spring, they boarded a train heading east, their first real journey together beyond the boundaries of Colorado. Wade was fascinated by the changing landscape outside the window, the way the mountains gave way to plains and then to the forests of the east. Willow watched him with amusement and love, seeing the world anew through his eyes. Philadelphia was exactly as Willow remembered and completely different. The streets seemed narrower, the buildings oppressively close together. The noise and crowds that had once been familiar now felt overwhelming after years in the open spaces of Colorado. But there was beauty, too, in the old architecture and the green squares, in the museums and theaters that brought back memories of her youth. Her parents' house looked smaller than she remembered, less imposing. She stood on the front steps with Wade beside her, gathering her courage. "Ready?" he asked, squeezing her hand. "Ready." The maid who answered the door did not recognize Willow at first, but when she announced herself, the woman's eyes went wide. Moments later, Willow's mother appeared in the hallway, older and grayer but still elegant. Willow. The name was a whisper, filled with decades of grief and anger and relief. "Hello, Mother." They did not embrace, the distance between them still too great, but Willow saw tears in her mother's eyes. Her father joined them, leaning heavily on a cane, and the four of them stood in awkward silence until Wade stepped forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Harper, I am Wade Jamison, your daughter's husband." Willow's father assessed Wade with shrewd eyes, taking in his worn but clean clothes and calloused hands. "A cowboy, a rancher, sir, and a man who has spent 25 years loving your daughter and trying to be worthy of her." Something in Wade's steady gaze and honest words seemed to soften Willow's father. "Come in. I suppose we have a great deal to discuss." The visit was difficult, full of difficult conversations and old wounds that had never healed. But slowly, over the course of a week, bridges began to be rebuilt. Willow's parents met their grandchildren through photographs and stories, learned about the life their daughter had built so far from home. They saw the way Wade looked at Willow, the deep love and respect that flowed between them, and gradually accepted that perhaps their daughter had chosen well after all. On their last night in Philadelphia, Willow's mother pulled her aside. "I owe you an apology. I thought you were throwing your life away going west. I thought you would come back in shame, begging to be taken in. I understand why you thought that, Mother, but you were wrong. I can see that now. You are happy, truly happy in a way I never was." Her mother's voice was wistful. "You were braver than I ever was. You gave me the foundation to be brave. You and Father, you made sure I was educated, that I could think for myself. I used those gifts in a different way than you expected, but they came from you." They embraced then, a real embrace, and Willow felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had not even realized she was carrying. Wade and Willow spent another month traveling, visiting New York and Boston and Washington, marveling at the bustle and culture of the East. But both of them were homesick, eager to return to the wide skies and clean air of Colorado. When they finally arrived back in Alamosa, William and his family were waiting at the station, along with Clara and Tommy, and what seemed like half the town. Willow stepped off the train into her son's embrace and felt tears of joy stream down her face. "Welcome home, Ma," William said, his voice thick with emotion. "It is so good to be home." And it was. The ranch looked more beautiful than ever, the mountains more majestic, the sky more impossibly blue. They settled back into their routines, but with a new appreciation for what they had. The trip had been wonderful, but it had also confirmed what they already knew in their hearts. This was where they belonged. More years passed, measured out in seasons and celebrations and quiet moments. Wade and Willow grew old together gracefully, their love a constant in a changing world. The turn of the century came, bringing with it new technologies and new ways of thinking. Automobiles appeared on the streets of Alamosa, and electricity came to town. But Wade and Willow remained rooted in the values that had sustained them all along. Grace married a teacher from Denver and took over the schoolhouse permanently, carrying on her mother's legacy. Jacob became a professor of English literature, returning to Colorado every summer with his family. William's ranch prospered, and he became one of the most respected cattlemen in the valley. On a warm summer evening in 1908, 30 years after Willow first arrived in Alamosa, she and Wade celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The party was held at the ranch, with long tables set up under the cottonwood trees and lanterns strung between the branches. As the sun set and the lanterns glowed to life, Wade stood and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast to my wife, Willow, who came to teach at the schoolhouse and ended up teaching me that love was the hardest lesson and the most important one I would ever learn. You are the best part of me, the best part of my life, and I thank God every day that you stepped off that stagecoach and into my world." Willow rose and kissed him amid cheers and applause, and as she looked around at the faces of their family, she felt overwhelming gratitude for the life they had built together. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love you more. Impossible." They danced as the stars came out, moving slowly to music played by their grandchildren. Willow's hair was white now, and Wade moved more stiffly than he once had. But in that moment, they were young again, two people falling in love in a frontier town. As the party wound down and people began heading home, Wade and Willow walked together toward the creek, their special place. The water sang its eternal song, and an owl hooted somewhere in the darkness. "If you could do it all over again," Wade asked, "would you change anything?" Willow did not hesitate, not a single thing. "Every moment, good and bad, led us here, led us to this. I feel the same way." Wade pulled her close, and they stood together under the stars. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something that would endure long after they were gone. They lived 10 more years together, 10 years filled with continued love and laughter and the joy of watching their family grow. When Wade passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 75, Willow held his hand and whispered all the words of love she had said 1,000 times before. She mourned him deeply, but she did not regret. Their time together had been a gift, precious and perfect. Willow lived another 5 years after Wade's death, spending her time with her family and volunteering at the schoolhouse that had brought her to Alamosa so long ago. She wrote her memoirs, wanting her descendants to know the story of how a refined lady from Philadelphia and a rough cowboy from Colorado had found love in the wild frontier. On a bright morning in May 1923, Willow Harper Jamison passed away surrounded by her children, her final words a whisper of Wade's name. They buried her beside him on the hill overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over the land and the family they had created together. Years later, their great-great-granddaughter would stand at that grave and read the words carved into the stone. She came to teach. She stayed for love. Together they built a legacy that endures. And she would understand that some love stories transcend time, that some connections are so deep they become the foundation for everything that follows. The schoolhouse still stands in Alamosa, now a museum dedicated to the history of education in the valley. Willow's books still line the shelves, and her desk, the one Wade had made for their 10th anniversary, occupies a place of honor. Visitors come from all over to hear the story of the teacher who came from the East and the cowboy who learned that love was worth more than cattle or land or pride. The ranch prospers still, passed down through generations of Jamisons who remember where they came from and honor the legacy of the couple who started it all. On summer evenings, if you stand by the creek and listen carefully, some say you can still hear the echo of laughter, the whisper of eternal love, the proof that what Wade and Willow built together will never truly die. Their story became legend in the valley, told and retold until it took on the quality of myth. But for those who knew them, who saw the way they looked at each other even after decades together, who witnessed the quiet strength of their partnership, the story was simply truth. Two people from different worlds who found each other when neither was looking, who chose love even when it was difficult, who proved that the greatest adventure is not in traveling to distant lands but in opening your heart to another person. And in the end, that is the lesson that endures. Not that love is easy, but that it is worth fighting for. Not that two people must be the same to build a life together, but that their differences can make them stronger. Not that happy endings come without struggle, but that the struggle makes the happiness sweeter. Wade and Willow's love story reminds us that sometimes the greatest risks lead to the greatest rewards, that following your heart can lead you to places you never imagined, and that true love, once found, can weather any storm and last beyond a lifetime. Their legacy lives on not just in their descendants, but in every person who has ever taken a chance on love, who has ever left behind the familiar for the unknown, who has ever believed that two souls can find each other even across impossible distances and build something beautiful together. The Wild West was a place of danger and hardship, of loneliness and struggle. But it was also a place where dreams could come true, where a schoolteacher from Philadelphia could find her purpose, and a cowboy from Colorado could discover his heart. Wade and Willow proved that love is not limited by circumstance or background, that it flourishes wherever two people are brave enough to let down their guards and vulnerable enough to truly see each other. So their story endures, a testament to the power of love, the importance of taking chances, and the truth that sometimes the best things in life come when we stop looking for them and open ourselves to possibility. She came to teach at the schoolhouse. He thought he had nothing to learn. Together they discovered that love was indeed the hardest lesson, but also the most rewarding, the most essential, the one that gave meaning to everything else. And they lived it fully, these two unlikely lovers, every single day until their last breath, proving that happily ever after is not a fairy tale ending but a choice made every morning, a commitment renewed with every sunrise, a love story written one moment at a time across the years until it becomes eternal.